The reason Kong Donggu chose the path of a developer was remarkably straightforward. He had envisioned it as a profession where he could immerse himself in his work quietly, a haven from the complexities of constant human interaction, a place where his only social bug would be in his code. Known at his company by the nickname Max, he was typically found lost in the lines of code on his dual monitors. One morning, his concentration was broken when a voice called out, "Max." It was a new colleague. Her belongings were still haphazardly piled in a box beside her recently assigned desk. She turned towards him, her expression inquisitive, and asked about the procedure for requesting workspace permissions. She explained that, being her first day in this new department, she had arrived early, eager to familiarize herself with the codebase, but there wasn't much else for her to do just yet. Max couldn't help but glance at the disorganized state of her area. He thought to himself that, were it his first day, setting up his station would have been his top priority. He informed her that Patrick was the one who handled permissions and usually arrived around 10 a.m. The new colleague noted aloud that there was still a fair bit of time until then. An awkward silence descended, punctuated only by the rhythmic clatter of their keyboards. Max, feeling the weight of the uncomfortable quiet, decided his best course of action was to act natural and put on his headset, silently hoping she wouldn't try to engage him in further conversation. But just as he reached for them, she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, right." She then inquired about the collaborative development guide document, specifically who was responsible for updating it, as it was something she had been genuinely curious about. Max, feeling a knot of nervousness, replied that he typically wrote the drafts, and Andy would then review them. He hesitantly asked if there was something wrong with it. She quickly reassured him, saying it was actually very well organized, adding that it was just as she'd heard. He was quite thorough. Max flinched internally at the compliment. He found himself wondering who she could have possibly heard that from, immediately cautioning himself not to jump to conclusions. The praise could very well have been directed at Andy. His thoughts were interrupted as she spoke again. With a warm smile, she requested that he simply call her Joy, without the formal nim suffix. Max let out an internal ugh. At that moment, another team member arrived, cheerfully greeting Joy and asking if she had managed to secure a location for their upcoming lunch gathering. Joy confirmed she had, prompting the colleague to jest about whether they should check the team's corporate card limit for the day. The colleague then suggested they all head downstairs for a coffee run, offering to pay. Max, observing Joy's already half-full coffee cup, silently questioned if she genuinely needed another. Joy, however, politely declined the offer, mentioning that Max couldn't drink coffee and that she also had her own tasks to handle. Max found himself thinking she seemed quite considerate. Undeterred, Joy brightly proposed that perhaps next time they could all have tea together, specifically caffeine-free. The suggestion felt somewhat overwhelming to Max, but he reluctantly agreed. Later, the team found themselves at a local eatery for their lunch gathering. Joy, it turned out, was a front-end developer with 5 years of experience, though her real name remained a mystery to her colleagues. She was known for being exceptionally skilled at her job and possessing a highly sociable nature. Max recalled hearing whispers that she boasted a significant number of Instagram followers. She certainly projected the image of a very diligent individual. He stole a glance in her direction. She always seemed to exude an infectious enthusiasm, effortlessly energizing everyone around her, a stark contrast to his own reserved demeanor. After their meal, the group made their way to a two-come place, a nearby coffee shop. Andy, another colleague, remembered Max's aversion to caffeine and pointed it out. He told Max to go on ahead back to the office, as the rest of them planned to stay and enjoy some coffee. Just as Max was about to leave, Joy called out, asking if he could possibly book a meeting room for 1 p.m. when he got back, adding that any available room would be fine and thanking him in advance. Max paused for a moment, processing the request. As the elevator ascended, a sense of mild irritation washed over him. This sucked. He found himself idly wondering why a coffee shop in this day and age wouldn't offer decaf options. Not that he would have stayed for coffee anyway, as he unwrapped a small candy. He grumbled internally, thinking that Joy, with her own junior colleagues, shouldn't be asking someone from another department to handle such a task. The elevator dinged, arriving at the 10th floor. This company, he mused with a sigh, seemed to have no consideration whatsoever. He stepped out into the code and canvas office space. Just one more month, he thought, and it will mark a full year since he'd joined. Perhaps it was time. He contemplated the severance pay he would receive and the prospect of starting his job search anew. His gaze then fell upon Joy's workstation, noticing that her laptop screen was still on. Curiosity piqued. He leaned in for a closer look and was surprised to see a job search website displayed prominently. A job search site. A quick glance at her on-screen calendar revealed a schedule packed with application submission deadlines and even second interview appointments. It was glaringly obvious to anyone who happened to look that she was actively preparing to leave the company. The memory of her cheerful invitation for tea earlier that morning resurfaced, now tinged with an unsettling irony. He found it rather scary that she could be so pleasant while secretly planning her exit, especially on her very first day with their team. This company, he concluded with a grimace, was teeming with hypocrites. It was a veritable jungle out here, a true survival of the fittest. He stopped in his tracks, letting out a heavy sigh. Leaving her screen open like that was incredibly careless, he thought, unless, of course, she simply didn't care who saw it. He scanned the office nervously, worried that someone else might stumble upon her secret. His anxiety intensified as he overheard hushed whispers from nearby employees, wondering about the person from the commerce team and what all the fuss was about. One of them advised the other not to make eye contact and to just keep moving. Max knew he had to do something. With a subtle movement, he reached over and gently closed the lid of her laptop. He then retreated to his own desk, trying to convince himself to just ignore the situation. It didn't matter if someone else was job hunting. It was, after all, none of his business. The earlier memory of the coffee offer replayed in his mind as he settled back in front of his monitors. The digital clock on his desk showed 12:31 p.m. Time seemed to crawl by, and soon it was 12:54 p.m. Joy returned to her desk, looking noticeably flustered. Her eyes immediately fell upon her closed laptop. She stared at the shut lid, a bead of sweat trickling down her temple as she tried to recall if she had left it that way. Her gaze drifted towards Max, who was slumped in his chair, sleeping with a raccoon-patterned sleep mask pulled over his eyes. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Just then, her junior colleague approached, asking if everything was all right, noting that Joy had seemed to leave in quite a hurry earlier. Startled, Joy quickly dismissed her concern, saying it was nothing. Almost on cue, her phone vibrated with an alarm, the screen displaying 12:55 p.m. Max genuinely felt a wave of drowsiness wash over him. He lamented internally that if he had eaten lunch alone, he could have squeezed in at least a solid 40-minute nap. Suddenly, a coffee cup was placed gently on his desk. He peeked from under his mask to see Joy standing there, offering him the drink and explaining it was for him. He mumbled a thank you, thoroughly perplexed. Examining the cup, he noticed a small demarked on the lid, decaf. He glanced up at Joy, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. She had actually been thoughtful enough to get him decaf. A new thought surfaced. Did she know he was awake? He was completely bewildered. Why? He wondered, did she keep looking at him with that particular expression? He risked another peek from beneath his sleep mask, a dreadful suspicion beginning to form in his mind. Could it be? Did she somehow realize he had seen her job search? But he had closed her laptop. He had covered it up. A surge of panic coursed through him. Should he be honest right now? Should he confess? I figured you might make a run for it, so I covered it up for you. No, that was an utterly crazy idea. He tried to rationalize his actions to himself. He had only closed it because it would have been a hassle if someone else had seen it. He hadn't asked for her permission, but then again, she had never asked for his help in the first place. What if she got angry at him for touching her things? Ugh, I was just being nosy, he berated himself. Damn. He should have just pretended not to see anything at all. Joy continued to look at him. Then, her expression softened into a smile. She commented that his headband, actually his sleep mask, was cute and asked where he had gotten it. She even chuckled, and asked if he could share the link. Max was beyond bewildered now, completely flustered. He stammered that he would send it to her through Messenger, feeling as though his mind was unraveling, as Joy thanked him cheerfully. Joy returned to her desk and clicked her mouse. Max, still reeling from the exchange, had absolutely no inkling at that precise moment how profoundly his work life was about to change forever. Unbeknownst to him, Joy noticed the small, crumpled candy wrapper he had inadvertently left on her desk when he closed her laptop. Max began his next day. His philosophy for arriving at work early was simple. It was the key to leaving early. A quick check of his watch confirmed it was 8:04 a.m. The office was a sanctuary of silence at this hour, a stark contrast to the usual hustle, as most team members typically trickled in between 9 and 10 a.m. This was the perfect, undisturbed environment he craved. He prepared a calming cup of chamomile tea, a ritual to soothe his mind and body before diving into the day's tasks, which always began with reviewing and refactoring the code he had written the previous day. This profound calmness was precisely what he cherished most, a peaceful state that was, however, abruptly shattered. He looked up, startled by an unexpected sound. The source of the disturbance was a series of crunches. His cherished healing time was unceremoniously interrupted. It was Joy, already at her desk, enjoying a noisy snack. She paused mid-crunch, noticing his gaze, and innocently offered him some of her treat. Max silently wondered if she'd offer him a job next, given her current trajectory. He declined with a strained, "No, I'm good," inwardly groaning at the realization of why he had to be seated directly next to her. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor, with Joy as the main character of his current office drama, and his piece experiencing a 404 error. Later that day, the clock on Max's desk showed 12:45 p.m. True to form, lunchtime brought a flurry of activity around Joy's desk as colleagues swarmed her like bees to honey. Max, desperate for a nap, found himself increasingly irritated by the surrounding chatter, wishing they would take their conversations to the break room or the cafe. He overheard someone remark to Joy that she had been coming in quite early lately. Joy cheerfully explained she was trying to build a better work-life balance, citing the benefits of flexible work hours, a claim Max found highly suspect given his earlier discovery. He scoffed internally. It seemed far more likely she was using the extra time to polish her resume before quitting. The interrogation continued as another colleague brought up Joy's half-day off from the previous day. When reminded that she had also taken emergency leave the week before, Joy's cheerful demeanor faltered, a nervous sweat appearing as she tried to maintain her composure. She stammered that she had just been incredibly busy preparing to move, attributing her absences to the chaos of it all. Max felt an inexplicable knot of anxiety tighten in his own stomach. Why was he the one feeling so on edge about her blatant lies? The office gossip soon migrated to the rooftop, a common spot for hushed conversations. Patrick, whose company nickname was Park Doyle, a senior from the Gangdong district, confidently declared to Max that it was obvious Joy was attending job interviews. He pointed out that it was currently peak hiring season, and her taking multiple days off during such a critical period was highly suspicious, something he'd consider too, if not for his own wedding preparations. Max, feeling dragged into the gossip, called Patrick a busybody and retorted that it was mere speculation since Joy had explicitly stated she was moving. Patrick, amused, called Max surprisingly naive and proposed a bet of 50,000 won on whether Joy would submit her resignation. Max couldn't help but think Patrick was acting like a child. Despite his exasperation, Max had to admit that Patrick's instincts were often alarmingly sharp. Then, Patrick abruptly changed the subject, asking Max if he could handle the 7 p.m. deployment for him that day. Max was utterly blindsided. Patrick explained he'd been scouting houses for his newlywed home and had just received a call from a realtor about a promising find, emphasizing that timing was crucial. Max finally understood. This was the real reason Patrick had lured him to the rooftop. With a disarming smile, Patrick then offered Max a ZMAX energy drink as a supposed gift, casually remarking how great it was to have a junior to help out, especially since Max didn't seem to have any afterwork plans. Max seethed internally, barely containing his fury. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Max found himself fuming at his desk, furiously typing away. Joy, noticing his agitated state and the energy drink, couldn't help but comment. She reminded him that he couldn't drink caffeine. Max, caught off guard, mumbled that it was more like a totem, just for display. Joy, taking him seriously, then offered to get him one whenever she saw a buy one, get one free deal at the convenience store. Max, feeling a fresh wave of despair, pleaded internally for her not to, the thought of quitting his job becoming increasingly tempting. Later, a notification popped up. Max had successfully deployed the latest version of the admin feature at 7:41 p.m. Joy, still at her desk, leaned over slightly, having seen the update. Max muttered to himself about how Patrick was just dumping work, finding the situation utterly devoid of humor, when Joy asked if the back office wasn't Patrick's responsibility. Max, flustered, mumbled something about Patrick's urgent realtor timing. The clock showed 7:45 p.m. Max, attempting to change the subject, asked Joy why she was still at the office, considering she had arrived at 8 a.m. She explained that she had planned to leave on time, but got caught up analyzing some code, and now it was quite late. She added she was about to head out. Max couldn't help but scoff internally at her pretense of responsibility, especially when he believed she was planning to leave the company anyway. As they were both packing up, Joy hesitantly turned to Max, her expression troubled. She quietly asked him if, hypothetically, someone were to switch jobs during a particularly busy period, would that be considered selfish? Max was stunned into silence. Joy quickly backpedaled, insisting she wasn't talking about herself, but rather a friend situation. Max, flustered by the directness of the question, despite her attempts to deflect, felt his own cheeks flush. He internally screamed, "Stop lying," as Joy continued to elaborate on her friend's dilemma. This friend, she explained, was worried about leaving teammates behind, couldn't focus, and was feeling deeply conflicted. Max, sighing internally, thought that Patrick already suspected her, and if she was going to quit, she should at least try not to be so obvious about it. Trying to offer some semblance of advice, Max stated that it was her friend's career, and if they received a good offer from a better place, they should definitely take it. Joy looked at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She asked, "Really?" Max let out an internal groan, the interaction feeling increasingly surreal. He wondered if he had sounded too arrogant, especially to someone with 5 years of experience. Just then, a notification pinged. QA was complete. Joy glanced at him thoughtfully. She then suggested that he should probably head home too. Somehow, despite Max's best efforts to maintain his distance, they ended up leaving the office building together. As they waited at the crosswalk, Joy mentioned she took the bus to Gyeongju Station and casually asked about his commute. Max replied that he also took the bus. Joy laughed, clarifying that she meant where he lived. He told her he lived near Ori Station. She exclaimed that their destinations were surprisingly close, wondering if they were going the same way. Max briefly considered taking the subway instead to avoid further interaction. This whole situation was incredibly awkward. At the bus stop, they sat down, a comfortable silence eluding them. Max decided to casually take out his headphones, hoping to signal his desire for solitude. Just as he was about to, Joy turned to him and offered him a handful of chocolates. She remarked that it was better than his decorative, caffeine-free drink, a little sugar boost instead of caffeine. Max, caught by surprise, accepted them with a mumbled thank you, the chocolates feeling like a peace offering for an undeclared war. He found himself wondering if he had inadvertently done something to deserve this kindness. He put in one earbud, feigning a need for music. Joy then leaned in slightly and whispered that the chocolates were for putting up with their lazy senior. Max was momentarily stunned, his carefully constructed defenses crumbling. He quickly tried to regain his composure, reminding himself that she was probably just being kind to everyone, as was her nature. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was constantly on the receiving end of her gestures. Feeling a sudden urge to reciprocate, Max fumbled in his bag and pulled out a throat candy, offering it to her. Joy's eyes lit up. She exclaimed that she loved those. She popped it into her mouth and, with a satisfied sigh, described the sharp, tingling sensation as unique, even laughingly comparing it to her throat burning with magma. Max could only stare, utterly bewildered by her vivid description. Well, he thought with a sigh of relief, if she liked it, then that was good enough for him. He watched as she examined the candy wrapper. Her expression suddenly shifted. Grapefruit flavor, she murmured, looking thoughtful. Her gaze then turned serious. Max, she began, her voice now devoid of its earlier playfulness. Leaning closer, she asked directly, "Did you happen to see my screen the other day?" The previous day's encounter at the bus stop had left Max deeply unsettled. Joy's direct question about whether he had seen her screen echoed in his mind. He had stood there, utterly flustered and exposed, the evening air at the bus stop suddenly feeling heavy. The screech of the arriving bus had been an almost welcome interruption. Max had quickly announced its arrival, saying she would head in first, while Joy could only manage a weak acknowledgement, the bus offering a temporary escape from her pointed inquiry. From the bus, Joy had looked back, her expression unreadable. The ride itself had been agonizing for Max. A nervous sweat beaded on his forehead as he replayed the conversation. He rubbed his temples, the tension palpable. Overwhelmed, he found himself hunched over in his seat, the singular thought dominating his mind. He desperately wanted to change jobs. The next morning, Max went through his usual ritual of preparing chamomile tea. However, the events of the previous day had taken their toll. He had barely slept and consequently arrived at work at 10 a.m., a first for him since starting at the company. He saw Joy already at her desk, a stark reminder of his restless night. She was diligently clicking away, seemingly unfazed. Max sipped his tea, his mind racing with anxious thoughts, wondering if Joy was okay, even contemplating taking a day off himself and idly checking his remaining vacation days. Suddenly, a declaration of an issue pierced the office quiet. Max looked up, startled. A colleague reported that the order screen wasn't appearing for a new partner store and immediately asked if this fell under Joy's responsibilities. Joy confirmed it was indeed her part. She explained to the concerned colleague that she had only received the handover documents for that specific section and, being new as of last week, it might take her some time to resolve it. The colleague then lamented that the person in charge, the one with the historical knowledge, was unfortunately off until the next day, leaving them in a bind. Max silently observed their exchange, a sense of foreboding settling in. This was the beginning of a new issue. Hours passed, and the office view shifted to a sunset glow, indicating they were working late into the evening. Max glanced at his phone. It was 7:45 p.m. on Tuesday, April 9th, his eyes tired and strained. He found himself wondering how the situation had escalated to this point, with him and Joy still at their desks. Joy then informed him she had checked the table and the sequel he had mentioned earlier. Max, drawing on his experience, suggested it might be a library version issue, recalling a similar problem with the settlement solution, and offered to investigate. Joy acknowledged his suggestion, impressed by his quick thinking. Internally, however, Max grumbled about the unfairness of it all, working unpaid overtime on a task that wasn't even his responsibility. But he quickly chided himself. That wasn't the real source of his current unease, was it? His mind kept replaying Joy's question from the previous day at the bus stop. He was almost certain she was referring to her laptop screen. He wondered if she was testing him or perhaps engaging in some sophisticated mind game. He resolved to feign ignorance until the very end. However, Joy, as if reading his thoughts, brought up their conversation from the bus stop. She mentioned the grapefruit-flavored candy, recalling a similar wrapper on a desk the previous week. She explained that the familiar candy had made her wonder if it was him who had left it there. Max's hand trembled slightly as he held his mug. With a disarming smile, Joy then told him not to worry about the screen thing, dismissing it as nothing and asking if he was okay. The sudden reassurance, coupled with his frayed nerves, proved too much. Max's hand jerked, sending his seahorse mug crashing to the floor, shattering into pieces. Joy gasped, asking if he was all right, as Max stammered that his hand had slipped, the demise of his favorite mug adding insult to injury. He mentally berated himself for being so nervous, even as Joy cautioned him against picking up the sharp fragments with his bare hands. He tried to convince himself he had done nothing wrong. Joy watched him for a moment, then called his name firmly. "Max, look at me." He hesitantly met her gaze, his own eyes wavering. As he knelt amidst the debris, Joy looked down at him, and with a knowing smile, asked the question he had been dreading. "Did you see it?" "The screen." Max froze, sweat trickling down his face, the moment of reckoning finally upon him. In his panic, he sliced his finger on a sharp piece of the broken mug. "Ouch!" he yelped as Joy rushed to his side, asking if he was okay. The dam of his composure finally broke. Max blurted out an apology, confessing he hadn't meant to look, that the screen was just there, all while hastily trying to clean up the mess. Joy, however, calmly took the cleaning supplies and reassured him he had nothing to apologize for. She even expressed gratitude, saying she appreciated that he cared enough to notice. She then handed him a cup of water, urging him to drink and hydrate after seeing he had bled. He managed a weak "thank you." They moved to the break room, where Max confessed he hadn't told anyone else about what he saw. Joy chuckled, saying she understood. She then surprised him by saying she should be the one apologizing. She explained that everyone had been desperate for extra manpower, and while they must have been relieved when she joined, she had been secretly planning to leave from day one. She admitted to feeling ashamed and embarrassed. Max, trying to comfort her, said that everyone has their own circumstances, adding, perhaps a little too honestly, that he had been planning his own escape route anyway. Joy looked at him, a new expression dawning on her face, and asked if he ever felt stuck. She recounted how, as a junior, she had worked overtime every single day, and though work had become easier after 3 years, getting used to the processes, it felt comfortable yet unsettling. Her experience was building, but her performance felt stagnant, trapped behind her sticker-covered laptop. She confessed she felt it was time to take on something new, but worried if she was merely getting too comfortable in her routine. So, she decided not to wait any longer, seized the opportunity, and just tried. Only to be caught by him, she finished with a small laugh, a first aid kit resting on the table beside her laptop. She then chuckled, asking if that had been too much information without him even asking, reflecting that sometimes the unknown outside world can feel scarier than the familiar hell one is used to. Max listened intently, her words resonating with his own unspoken feelings. He, too, always dreamed of quitting and changing jobs, but for him, it had always remained just talk, a fleeting thought never acted upon, much like his perpetually steeping tea, never quite reaching its full potential. He looked down for a moment, then met her gaze and told her that what she was doing was impressive. He acknowledged the common saying that developers are lifelong learners and admitted he actually admired that quality in her. He praised her refusal to settle, affirming her choice. He added that, at the end of the day, no company is responsible for their lives, so it was perfectly okay for her to prioritize herself. A brief silence fell between them. Max immediately worried he had said too much, stammering that the company wouldn't change just because she left, anxious she might think he was overstepping. Joy simply looked at him with a gentle smile. "That's impressive," she echoed his earlier sentiment, then sincerely thanked him for his support. Suddenly, Max let out a triumphant yell. "Ah, I fixed it," startling Joy. He excitedly urged her to look at his screen. Joy, amazed, asked how he had managed it. He explained that it really was a library version issue. Her earlier comment about it had stuck in his mind, a flashback to her mentioning the possibility earlier that evening playing in his head. He elaborated that he had checked, just in case. And indeed, that was the problem. With a Band-Aid now on his finger, he eagerly asked if they could finally go home. Joy looked at him thoughtfully for a long moment. Max, feeling a surge of accomplishment, added that he had already requested a Q&A for the fix and planned to check for other library issues the next day. A spark ignited in Joy's eyes, a new idea clearly forming as a smile spread across her face. "Max," she began, her voice soft yet firm. Leaning in with an almost conspiratorial air, she proposed, "Should we start a job change study group together?" Max was rendered speechless, utterly dumbfounded by her audacious suggestion. What in the world was this woman saying? His mind struggled to process the unexpected, almost comedic turn of events. The next morning arrived with a dull ache of exhaustion for Max. He looked utterly drained, his phone slipping from his grasp as a wave of fatigue washed over him. Had he really pulled 2 all-nighters in a row? He wondered, stumbling towards the office lounge, oblivious to a passing colleague's curious glance. Joy's unexpected proposal from the previous night replayed in his mind. Her suggestion to start a job change study group together still seemed surreal. He was at a complete loss, unsure how to respond to such an audacious idea. His first instinct was to search WikiWhat for articles on how to politely turn someone down and how to reject someone, clearly not ready to dive into a job hunting and chill scenario. He knew he needed to say something, anything, to take control of the situation, to be bold. Just as he was steeling his nerves, a voice from behind startled him. "Max, are you busy?" He yelped, jumping in surprise. It was his junior colleague. She asked why he was so jumpy and pointed out the dark circles under his eyes. Flustered, Max stammered that she had startled him and asked what she wanted. She informed him that Donald, their team leader, was calling for him and wanted to see him in meeting room 3. The sign for meeting room 3 loomed ominously. Max hesitantly opened the door, a sense of trepidation washing over him. Inside, Han Do-kyung, known by his company nickname Donald, and the commerce team leader, greeted him with a cheerful smile, remarking that Max had been working hard lately. Donald then offered Max a cup of chamomile tea, a gesture that seemed almost too thoughtful. He even remembered that Max didn't drink caffeine, his smile unwavering. Max accepted the tea with a mumbled thank you, the formal setting making him uneasy. Donald began by mentioning he had heard Andy was on leave the previous day and that Max had handled the ensuing issues. He also brought up that 2 days prior, Max had covered Patrick's deployment. Donald observed that Max must be swamped with his own work, let alone these extra tasks, and wondered what was going on all of a sudden. With a knowing glint in his eye, Donald then quipped that at this rate, Max might end up switching jobs, letting out a hearty laugh. Max nearly choked on his tea at the remark, but Donald quickly assured him he was just kidding. Then, Donald's demeanor shifted. He leaned forward, his expression earnest, and said that, if Max was okay with it, they were considering renegotiating his salary around the 3rd quarter. Max was stunned, the news catching him completely off guard. Donald explained that ever since several people had left the commerce team at the end of last year, things had been hectic for everyone, and this salary review was a special process reserved for those who had worked exceptionally hard. Max's hand tightened, his mind reeling. Was this for real? Donald added that the CEO had also signed off on it. He leaned in closer, emphasizing that from the company's perspective, retaining capable people was more important than hiring new ones, and, of course, this information was strictly confidential. Max was left speechless, a single bead of sweat trickling down his temple. He managed a dazed, got it. Donald then declared he would take that as a yes and produced a code and canvas corporate card. He explained that since Max had worked hard handling issues the previous day, he should take Joy and go eat something nice together, instructing him to submit the receipt to the finance department separately. Max, still processing the salary news, could only focus on the word together. Donald confirmed, asking if the person who had worked hard with him yesterday wasn't Joy. He praised Joy as a valuable talent they had barely managed to recruit from the accounting team, acknowledging that things must be chaotic for her too without a proper handover. He concluded that treating them both to a meal was the least the company could do. With a booming voice, Donald declared Joy and Max the present and future of their team, his enthusiasm almost overwhelming. Back at his desk, Max stared at the corporate card, his mind still a whirlwind. His gaze fell upon Joy's large, green tumbler with a cute paw print straw. Joy, sensing his stare, looked up with a questioning glance. Max, still holding the card, awkwardly asked if there was anything specific she'd like to eat, scratching his head in bewilderment. Joy, after a moment of thought, said, Max couldn't help but wished Donald had just explicitly said they could splurge on the company card. Suddenly, Joy pulled out her phone, its cute, sticker-adorned case flashing before Max's eyes. She began listing her schedule, lunch plans with the accounting team today, a lunch date with Esther tomorrow, the weekend following that, and then she was on leave Monday next week. Max was completely baffled, wondering what exactly she wanted him to do with this information. A dreadful thought began to form. Was she subtly telling him to just take the card and disappear? Before he could voice his confusion, Joy brightly suggested, "How about dinner later?" And so, Max found himself at a gourmet beef restaurant, the sizzle of the grill filling the air. He sat there, still trying to comprehend the evening's bizarre turn of events. Joy remarked that they were lucky to get a spot, adding she had been there before with Esther, and it was quite good. Max could only manage a week agreement. Joy then declared they still had unfinished business from the previous day to discuss, explaining that there were too many prying eyes during lunch. Max poured himself a drink, silently lamenting how he had ended up in this situation. As Joy perused the menu, she asked if he drank. He replied he'd just have a 0-calorie Coke, wondering how this situation escalated. Before he could even finish his thought, Joy enthusiastically flagged down the server, ordering Set B, 1 0 Coke and 1 draft beer, completely ignoring his preference. She then placed the menu down decisively and, with a knowing smile, asked if he had given any thought to her proposal about the job change study group. Max was momentarily speechless. The endless extra tasks, the never-ending overtime, the same vicious cycle of his work life flashing before his eyes. Joy, noticing his hesitation, correctly guessed that he, too, had been thinking about changing jobs. Max couldn't deny it. She wasn't wrong. Quitting or changing jobs had always been an option he considered. But then, Donald's words echoed in his mind. From the company's perspective, retaining capable people is more important than hiring new ones, followed by the stern reminder that this was strictly confidential. Joy continued, musing that there must be other developers in the company also considering job changes. Max, finally finding his voice, asked her why she had chosen him specifically, curious about her reasoning. Joy looked at him intently for a moment. Then, with a radiant smile, she declared, "Because you're the complete opposite of me." Max was utterly bewildered by her answer. Huh? The lively chatter of the restaurant faded into the background as Joy began to explain. She pointed out that every morning after clocking in, he refactored his code. Max confirmed this, wondering if she had somehow checked his submit history. Joy continued, noting that while no one else really noticed, he had been doing it consistently for a year. She confessed she had thought to herself that this person must genuinely enjoy refining things into perfect code, a pint of beer glistening beside her. She even praised the comments he left in his code, saying anyone reading them for the first time could understand them immediately. His code, she said, reflected his kindness. It might be a bit slower, but it was flawless. Honestly, she admitted, it made her reflect on herself. "That's why it's you, Max," she declared, her eyes sparkling. "I admire that strength in you." Max was taken aback, a strange warmth spreading through him at her unexpected praise. He looked down, a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions stirring within him. He recalled past criticisms, Patrick asking if he worked there alone and telling him to stop refactoring deployed code and help the team instead. Another colleague advising him to just take it easy, as no one in the company appreciated all that refactoring. Strength, right? He mumbled, the word feeling foreign yet strangely validating. "Ah, and there's one more thing," Joy exclaimed, interrupting his thoughts, another reason why she had chosen him. "Well, she began, a mischievous glint in her eye. "I just don't think you'd ever cross the line." Max, thoroughly confused and wondering if she was drunk, asked what she meant. Joy, looking a bit flustered, tried to explain, asking him not to take it the wrong way. She elaborated that sometimes in clubs or study groups, men with ulterior motives appear. But I don't think you're like that, Max. Never, she declared with absolute certainty, taking a confident sip of his Coke. Max, still processing, asked what she was even talking about. With a bright, reassuring smile, Joy elaborated, like, you don't seem like the type to suddenly confess to me or anything. Max nearly choked on his drink, the absurdity of her statement hitting him like a ton of bricks. The night sky was dominated by a full, luminous moon as Max returned home after the eventful dinner with Joy. He announced his arrival, only to be met by his mom, who observed he was late again and asked if he had eaten. Max assured her he was fine, a silent dismissal of her concern. The warm water from the shower cascaded over him, a brief respite from the day's chaos. Normally, after such a long day, he would recharge his dopamine levels by gaming with YouTube playing in the background or finally catching up on a foreign drama he had been putting off. But tonight, his usual routine was interrupted by a notification on his phone. It was a message from Joy. She had texted, "At Max, let me know by tomorrow after you." Max sat on the floor, staring at the message, her words trailing off, leaving him in suspense. He replayed her earlier declaration in his mind, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. Like, you don't seem like the type to suddenly confess to me or anything. The words, meant as a compliment, echoed with an unsettling ambiguity. He was pretty sure it was a compliment, yet he couldn't shake an uncomfortable feeling. Confess? He wondered, questioning if he was reading too much in her words, especially with her profile picture showing a serene, smiling Joy. He continued to ponder her message, a puzzled expression on his face. Suddenly, a voice from behind him exclaimed, "Oh ho," startling him. It was his sister, Kang Soo-won, peering over his shoulder at his phone. "Whoa, you scared me," Max yelped, as Soo-won, noticing Joy's picture, remarked that she was gorgeous and asked who she was. Max stammered that she was just a co-worker. Soo-won, however, was not convinced. "What, hey, no," she chided, reminding him of her previous advice. Never date anyone at work. Kang Soo-won, his older sister, was a veteran of 4 job changes and 2 office romances and currently single, a seasoned expert in the perils of workplace relationships. He insisted it wasn't like that, claiming she could tell just by looking at Joy that she was out of his league. Max let out an internal ugh at her blunt assessment. Soo-won then flopped onto the couch, asking if he remembered his first job change. Max confirmed he did, to which Soo-won casually mentioned she was probably preparing for it while doing a job change study group. "A job change study group?" Max exclaimed, the coincidence striking him as almost too convenient. Soo-won confirmed, adding they had even made an app as a side project, then casually asked if he was thinking of quitting. Max denied it, saying he was just considering his options. Soo-won, with a dismissive wave of her hand, advised him to just stay where he was, questioning who else would hire an antisocial like him. Max, seething, internally debated whether he should kill her, metaphorically of course. Despite her teasing, Soo-won did recommend the job change study group. She pointed out that at least he would have something to show for it, a portfolio, side projects, and if the members were good, it would be worth it. Plus, she added, yanking on his hair, one never knew when the right time to change jobs would come. It was better to be prepared so he could escape when things got bad. Max grumbled for her to let go. As a final piece of advice, Soo-won wagged her finger, sternly reminding him, absolutely no office romance. Okay? Max, peering out the window at the moonlit sky, muttered, gross. The next day, at the office, a meeting was underway in meeting room 07. The team had already hotfixed last week's problem, and so far, no anomalies had been detected. However, considering their current timeline, they would need some dev support. Max, struggling to stay awake after another sleepless night, found himself rubbing his eyes, the thought, all this for a job change, echoing in his mind. Suddenly, Andy, a colleague, clapped him on the shoulder, exclaiming, "Max, I count on your support this time, too." Max was completely bewildered. Andy, noticing his confusion, clarified that Max should help them out later that afternoon. Patrick then chimed in, adding that he was swamped these days, giving Max a thumbs up, much to Max's internal frustration. Why was he always stuck doing this? Patrick then turned to his junior colleague, asking if Max wasn't working too hard with all the wedding prep and everything, and rhetorically questioned if being a good junior didn't mean helping one senior. The junior colleague then offered to grab Max a coffee for a caffeine boost. Patrick enthusiastically declared that coffee was on him. For Max too. Max clenched his fist, internally screaming that he didn't even drink coffee and that after a year of working together, Patrick still didn't know. The memory of Joy's thoughtful gestures resurfaced. Her bringing him decaf coffee, offering him chocolates, her whispered thanks for backing up their lazy senior, and her sincere praise. Your code reflects your kindness. Patrick's voice, echoing Joy's earlier sentiment. That's why you're Max, jolted him back to the present. He looked up, a new resolve hardening in his eyes. The usual office chatter buzzed around him. Joy was at her desk, sipping on a nutrient drink. At 1:46 p.m., a message from Max popped up on Joy's phone. "Dio, you have a moment, Tio? Chat privately." Joy, looking up from her phone, her nutrient drink still in hand, appeared intrigued. Underneath the blooming cherry blossoms, the sun shining brightly overhead, they sat together on a park bench. Max, taking a deep breath, announced, "I'll do it." The job change study group. Joy, visibly surprised, exclaimed, "Whoa, really?" Max clarified that it wasn't like he was desperate to switch jobs right then and there, but he figured there was no harm in being prepared. He added that since he might not be happy with the third-quarter salary negotiations, it was better to have a backup plan. Joy let out a sigh of relief. Admitting she had been nervous, he would say no. It was always better to have a backup, just in case, Max thought, a gentle breeze rustling the cherry blossom petals around them. He closed his eyes for a moment, a sense of quiet determination settling over him. He opened them again, his gaze steady. Joy undeniably possessed excellent skills and a sociable personality, despite her occasional denials. She was always energetic, giving those around her a boost, the complete opposite of him. Max mused, a soft smile playing on his lips as he watched her. Joy turned towards him, a curious expression on her face. Max, feeling a newfound sense of purpose, thought that maybe, just maybe, if he stuck around her, he could change a little too. He cleared his throat, a nervous habit, and then, with a newfound confidence, asked, "So, where do we start?" He pulled out his phone, wondering how the job change study group would work, suggesting a side project meeting, and inquiring about the logistics like the place and time. Joy looked at him, a playful smile spreading across her face. She responded brightly, "I didn't think about any of that yet." Max was momentarily stunned, a look of disbelief washing over him. Can I really trust this person? He wondered, a mix of amusement and apprehension swirling within him as he gazed at Joy, her smile as radiant as the cherry blossoms surrounding them. Meanwhile, at a nearby cafe, a blonde woman collected her 2 Americanos. As she exited the cafe, she noticed Max and Joy walking together up the steps of the building. She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face, as she watched them disappear inside, murmuring, "Joy and Max." 2 days after Max agreed to the job change study group, they decided to meet at the company's first-floor cafe to plan ahead. Max, sipping his coffee, casually asked Joy about the numerous interviews she had marked on her calendar. Joy explained that she had passed most of them, but turned them all down, even canceling her remaining appointments. She declared she was aiming higher. Max questioned what higher meant, and Joy elaborated, mentioning unicorn companies' private startups valued at over $1 billion, stating she felt a trendy yet well-established organization would be best for her, and naturally, the salary would need to be higher too. She then turned the question to Max, asking what kind of company he'd like to move to. Max admitted he wasn't sure yet and planned to think it over as they progressed with the study group. Joy, holding her paw-themed stylus, expressed her curiosity, playfully wondering where Max would be working a year from then. Max, trying to steer clear of such daydreams, urged himself to focus, dismissing her remark as mere politeness. He cleared his throat, stating they had a lot to decide, like the concept for their side project and a study location. as his laptop screen blinked innocuously. Suddenly, a voice from behind Max asked, "What study group?" startling him. It was Esther, a UX/UI designer from their company, her real name unknown, looking at them with a curious smile. Max stammered, panicking internally about how much she might have overheard. He glanced at Joy, hoping she'd cover for them, but Joy seemed to have frozen, uttering only small, flustered noises. Thinking fast, Max awkwardly explained that Joy knew someone running a development study group, and he was just consulting about possibly joining. Esther found this surprising, remarking that she thought Max was the type to just play single-player games after work. The comment hit Max like a well-aimed headshot in a video game. He internally fumed at her observation, though he lamely agreed that self-improvement was important. Esther noted she'd never seen him working at the company cafe before, to which Max, desperate to leave, replied that he needed to get out of there. He quickly announced he was going upstairs to work. Joy then suggested heading to the convenience store and invited Esther, who accepted. As Max turned to leave, Esther called out his name, cheerily asking if he wanted her to grab him something. Max, eager to escape, curtly replied he was good and hurried off. The next day, at 2:35 p.m., Esther and Max were discussing a project. Esther explained the product search area, and Max suggested they need to implement debouncing due to the number of API calls. Esther agreed, assigning the browser-side work to Joy and telling Max he just needed to check if indexing was necessary. Max, however, was distracted, wondering if Esther had really not heard anything of the cafe the previous day. The thought was seriously bugging him, making it hard to focus. He worried about the information spreading. Esther, noticing his distraction, asked if her request would be difficult. Max, startled, quickly reassured her it was doable and they'd make it happen, impressed that she knew development terms so well. Esther just smiled enigmatically from her desk. A moment later, Esther leaned towards Max, whispering that she saw him coming in with Joy. She pointed out they were at a cafe he didn't normally frequent and had been working a lot of late nights together. Max internally panicked, wondering if she'd figured everything out. Esther then asked, with a knowing smile, if Max was interested in Joy too. Max vehemently denied it. Esther, feigning surprise, said she thought he had joined the competition like everyone else. Max was confused about this competition. Esther explained, in a hushed tone, that Joy was very popular, and many had tried to get close to her, only to be rejected. She counted off at least 4 people she knew of, adding that a couple even quit after confessing. Max found this information terrifying. He stated firmly that work was for working and playing around with emotions like that was pointless. Esther remarked that it sounded like a quote. Max internally added that this was what his sister had drilled into him after her own office romance attempts. He tried to steer the conversation back to work, asking if there was anything else to revise. Esther, with a cheerful, "It's nothing. Good work today," placed a lucky red ginseng candy on his desk, wishing him an afternoon free of emotional drama. Max mumbled his thanks. Later that evening, at 7:40 p.m., Max was still at his desk, the open candy beside him. He grumbled that even lucky ginseng candy couldn't stop overtime. Just then, Joy appeared, asking if he wasn't leaving yet. Max explained it was due to Patrick's request and should be wrapped up in about 2 hours. Joy then invited him to get some air on the rooftop, presumably to discuss the study group. On the rooftop, with the evening sky painting a warm glow, Joy suggested weekday evenings for their study group, about twice a week, to which Max agreed, noting they needed weekends to rest. For the location, Max thought near the office felt awkward and proposed Gyeongju Station, 1 subway stop away. Joy said that was close to her place and fine with her, asking if it was okay for Max. He confirmed it was on his way home and acceptable for a quick cafe meeting. Joy, tapping on her phone, recalled he lived near Ori Station. They agreed that once they decided on the side project and its functions, they could do progress check-ins online. Joy commented on the nice sky, and Max absently agreed. The sun continued its descent, casting long shadows. Max remained silent for a moment. He then asked if he thought they could pull this off considering their busy jobs and frequent overtime, and preparing all this on top of that. Joy admitted it wouldn't be easy. She, with an encouraging smile, said that's why they were doing it together. Max looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. As they rode the elevator down, Joy apologized for the conversation, dragging on while he still had work to do. Max assured her he was fine, but noted her shift was getting late. Joy then suddenly asked if they needed to call each other by their nicknames outside the office. Max was taken aback. Joy explained that using Joy and Max outside the office sounded a bit funny, and wondered if they should just use real names when it was just them. Max, flustered, said he didn't really mind. Joy then confirmed his real name was Donggu, right? Max was shocked, as Joy added that Patrick sometimes called him that. Hearing his real name from her felt incredibly weird. He mumbled that his surname was Kong, thus confirming he was Kong Donggu. Joy, with a teasing look, asked if he wasn't born in Gangdong District, Seoul, making a pun on his name. Max, seriously, stated he was born and raised in Songnam. Joy chuckled, remarking that somehow his real name left a bigger impression than Max. Max grumbled internally, wishing she would just go home already as the elevator descended to the second floor. They stood in silence. Max felt time slowing down to a crawl. As the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, Joy turned to him. "Donggu," she began. "Aren't you going to ask my name?" As the elevator doors slid open on the ground floor, Max looked at Joy with a questioning gaze. She met his look, phone in hand, and asked if he wasn't going to ask for her name. Max hesitated, then admitted that now that she mentioned it, he was a bit curious. With a playful smirk, Joy declared she wouldn't tell him, adding a light haha, and winked while looking at her phone, making Max wonder if she was just messing with him. His mind quickly went to the company's emergency contact network, where employees' phone numbers and names were listed. If he saved her number in the messenger, her name should show up. Just as the elevator arrived at their floor, Joy seemed to have a small realization. As they stepped out, Max silently considered his plan, but he quickly dismissed the thought. There was no way she would. Just then, Joy, anticipating his thought, quickly changed her messenger profile picture to a cartoonish image of food with question marks, exclaiming, "What if I do this?" Max let out an exasperated, Her profile picture was now a close-up of some pastry, effectively hiding her usual photo. She then triumphantly declared, "Now you can't find out, right? Ha ha," as she walked off, leaving Max to wonder if she was a child. With a wink, she then said it was just a joke, and she'd put it back to normal. She then leaned in, suggesting they should talk about the change log via personal messenger, revealing she hadn't known before, but apparently, someone with admin privileges could see all conversations in the company messenger. Max acknowledged this new, slightly alarming piece of information. That, she declared, was why they should exchange numbers, holding up her phone with the keypad open. Max was caught off guard, questioning if she meant right now. Joy, with a cheerful smile, told him he wouldn't need to check the emergency contact list for her name. She would message him. Max, standing before the towering office buildings under the night sky, reluctantly agreed. Later that night, the city lights twinkled outside his window as Max lay in his room, phone in hand. He tapped on Joy's new profile picture, revealing her previous one and, beneath it, her real name, Jang Chairin. Her real name. He pressed the contact info, exchanging personal numbers with a co-worker. He mused if this was the first time he'd done that since joining the company, recalling her serene profile picture. He swiped through her other pictures, one showing a colorful cocktail. Going off just a glance, he thought, she and he lived in completely different worlds. If it weren't for work, their paths would never have crossed. Joy's earlier promise, "I'll message you," echoed in his mind. He let out a sigh, deciding he should forget it and just get some sleep, pressing the side button of his phone to turn off the screen. The next day marked the beginning of episode 07, subtitled Cherry Blossoms, a playful nod to Chairin and the season. Max checked his phone, seeing messages from Jang Chairin. She had suggested that since Friday was today, they should hold their first meeting after work on Monday, and that they should each bring at least 2 side project ideas by then. He had replied with a simple "sure" and got it. He thought that he'd have to look for side project ideas over the weekend, a small, almost imperceptible thought crossing his mind. This might actually be fun. At the office, Jong Juno, also known as Jaden from Service Operations Support, approached Joy's desk, asking if she hadn't had coffee yet and offering to buy her one. Joy interjected that he had emails to check. Jaden, with his usual carefree attitude, told Joy to just wing it, remarking it wasn't like they paid more for working so hard. Max merely thought, what a mindset. As he walked past, Joy then brightly suggested, why don't we bring Max along too? Leaving both Max and Jaden momentarily surprised. Jaden, recovering quickly, leaned in conspiratorially towards Joy, whispering that Max didn't like caffeine and they had to be considerate. Max internally cringed. He let out a sigh, then reluctantly said he'd have a decaf Americano, wondering why he was even doing this as he walked towards the cafe with Jaden and Joy. At the cafe, Jaden asked Joy if she had gone to see the cherry blossoms that year. Joy replied no, explaining she had been busy with a lot of things. Jaden mentioned Seakshan Lake was popular, recommending it. Max, internally, thought it was far and would be crowded, finding Jaden's blatant flirting unbearable. Jaden added that if it rained, the cherry blossoms would be gone for the year, offering to take Joy there sometime, and also suggesting the nearby tangent stream. Joy looked at her phone, a slight blush on her cheeks, while Max just felt ugh. Max then awkwardly blurted out that since Joy lived near Gyeongju Station, there was a spot close by where the cherry blossoms were really pretty, internally scolding himself. Kong Donggu, get it together. Who asked? Did anyone ask? He continued, trying to salvage the situation, saying there were only locals there, so it was peaceful and a good place for a walk, though he admitted he hadn't had a chance to see it properly himself due to working overtime, as Joy looked at her phone. Jaden, however, dismissed this, saying hotspots were still better than local spots, just as their coffee buzzer rang. Joy exclaimed the coffee was ready and quickly got up, suggesting they take it upstairs. Max noted how fast she got up. Jaden gave Max a knowing look, the kind that says, I see what you did there. Jaden then remarked that Max must have become close friends with Joy because he sat next to her. Max internally groaned, damning himself for coming down to the cafe in the first place. Back at her desk, Joy placed her tablet down and then into her bag. She turned to Max, mentioning she went to the park near the office with Esther during lunch and the cherry blossoms were nice, teasingly adding that Max didn't see them since he was eating alone. Max questioned if she was teasing him while he was pulling overtime for their log schedule, convinced she was starting to enjoy teasing him too much. Joy then made a small fist and asked, "WH is it?" As Max remembered she had done this before, making him uneasy. She opened her hand over his, showering his hand with delicate cherry blossom petals. She declared it was a reward for saving her that morning, referring to his attempt to divert Jaden's attention, perhaps. As the petals scattered, she cheerfully wished him a great weekend and turned to leave, making Max wonder what that was all about, as she dropped them all over the floor. He called after her, telling her to at least pick up what she dropped. The image of his earlier, flustered attempt to suggest a cherry blossom spot flashed in his mind, followed by Joy's expression as she looked at her phone. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. He looked at the petals in his hand. As Joy was about to leave the office area, Max hesitated, then called out, a little awkwardly, "Chirin, have a good weekend." He slumped onto his desk. Joy paused for a moment, then turned back with a bright smile, waved, and wished him good luck. The office grew dimmer as Max continued to work, the sound of his typing echoing in the near-empty space. Finally, checking his watch, he decided to call it quits for the day. He had things to do over the weekend, but as he reached the elevator, he was met with an elevator maintenance, no entry sign. He sighed, realizing he'd have to take the emergency stairs. As he descended, he heard a voice from below, someone shouting, damn, seriously? Stop crying and talk to me." Max paused, wondering what was happening. Was it a fight? He thought he heard someone curse, or maybe he misheard. Peeking down, he saw two figures on the landing below, a man and a woman. The man, whom Max vaguely recognized as a planner from the business development team, was distraught, asking what he was supposed to do if her feelings for him were gone. Max, realizing he'd stumbled into yet another office drama, quietly started to back away, thinking that if one person falls out of love, isn't that the end of a relationship? The planner's desperate voice echoed, "Yoon, say something. Damn it." Max's eyes widened in recognition. The woman, standing silently with a cold expression, was Esther. The flickering fluorescent light of the stairwell cast dancing shadows as Max processed the uncomfortable scene unfolding below him. It was Esther, her expression as cold as the concrete walls, facing off against the distraught planner. It seemed she had her own circumstances, but a quick glance told Max the best course of action was to avoid involvement, though he needed to pass through there to get home. He decided to retreat upstairs for now, but as he turned, a small ah escaped him. His wireless earphones slipped from his grasp, clattering down the steps with a sound that seemed to shriek, "Kaira!" in the sudden quiet, each bounce echoing his rising panic. The rogue earphone landed with a final, damning clink right near the planner's shoes. It was at this moment he knew. He'd messed up. With a surge of adrenaline, he yanked open the stairwell door and slammed it shut behind him, panting heavily on the other side. He let out a ragged sigh, the absurdity of the situation hitting him. His escape route, the elevator, was still mockingly displaying its elevator under inspection. No entry sign, making him wonder what sin he'd committed in a past life to deserve this inability to simply leave work. The stark no entry seemed to glare at him. Defeated, Max sat on a nearby bench, checking his watch. About 20 minutes had passed. Things seemed to have quieted down in the stairwell, so he figured it should be safe to try going down again. An image of Esther's earlier, troubled expression flashed in his mind, causing him a moment's hesitation as a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. He quickly pushed the thought away. It was none of his business. He steeled himself and reached for the door. Just as he did, Esther appeared, startling him into an internal rant about the perils of workplace dating. Before he could react, Esther explained she had picked up something by the emergency stairs and was going to drop it off at the office. Max, internally panicking about why she was still there, managed an awkward hello, noting she hadn't left work yet. Esther replied, "Oh no." She then held out his dropped earphone, and Max groaned internally. That was definitely his. He mumbled his thanks, saying he'd been wondering who dropped it and that he'd head in first, planning to pretend ignorance and recover his other earphone later. But Esther's sharp side glance told him she wasn't done. She quickly grabbed his arm, much to his surprise. Her eyes then caught the single earphone still in his other ear. She asked if they used the same ones, a horrifying realization dawning on Max. He'd forgotten to take the other one out. Esther, tilting her head, asked why he was only wearing one in his ear. Max stammered that it was just a style, he guessed. An awkward silence hung heavy between them on the landing. Max tried to edge away, muttering he should probably get going. "Hey," Esther called out, her voice soft but firm. She tightened her grip on his arm, her eyes glinting with an unnerving intensity as she asked where he thought he was going. Max felt a primal urge to yell, "Spare me." This marked the beginning of a truly hard day. Moments later, Esther plunked a small juice box onto a table outside a convenience store. She seemed to think it was actually great that Max, of all people, had witnessed her cringiest moment. She declared she could trust him, as he was quiet and knew how to keep work and personal stuff separate, adding she'd always had a good opinion of him. Max just managed an yes, while Esther casually asked if he was sitting there against his will. Max, internally screaming that she was seriously asking that now and begging to be allowed home, forced out a not at all, just as a thud echoed his feelings. Esther then face-planted onto the table, overcome with embarrassment, leaving Max to awkwardly watch her. She muttered about getting dumped at the office with a teammate witnessing it, even asking if she should just jump off. Max, flustered, awkwardly suggested it was late and maybe she should go home and rest. Lifting her head slightly, Esther revealed the planner had called her clingy and burdensome, a revelation that surprised Max. She lamented that she really did her best, waiting late every day so they could leave work together and even adjusting her schedule to match his in the mornings. In relationships, he didn't like her talking to other male co-workers, so she kept her distance on purpose. Max didn't know what to say. He was utterly speechless. Esther continued, her voice heavy, explaining that even at the end of last year, when she got a great job offer, she turned it down because she didn't want them to grow apart. Max felt a flicker of half-hearted sympathy, but then considered the awkward situation she'd dragged him into. After making him go through all that, was clumsy comfort still better than nothing? Now, she concluded, the planner said he didn't think office dating suited him. Max decisively crushed his empty juice can. No, offering some kind of ill-fitting comfort wouldn't suit him. He resolved that he should only say things he could take responsibility for. He turned to Esther, stating firmly that he wouldn't say a word to anyone. A single tear traced a path down her cheek as she looked up at him. He then handed her another juice box he'd bought, adding that he didn't even think it was something to be embarrassed about. He urged her to please not worry about it and just go home for today. Esther was silent for a moment, then slowly raised her hand, wiggling her pinky finger with a questioning look. She wanted a pinky promise for his silence. Max internally groaned, thinking she didn't have to say that, while Esther teased him, asking if he was embarrassed. I am not, Max retorted a little too quickly. Then hurry, Esther sing-songed, grabbing his hand. Max grumbled, turoli flüstert. As their pinkies linked, Max wondered what on earth he was even doing right now. As Esther got into a waiting taxi, she asked Max what year he was born, suggesting they could just be friends if it was within a 2-year difference. Max flatly stated that being co-workers at work was enough. Esther pouted, "Boo, no fun." Max quickly snapped a photo of the taxi's license plate as it pulled away, relieved he could finally go home. The taxi disappeared into the night. Esther gazed thoughtfully out the window as she departed. The full moon shone brightly over the apartment buildings as Max finally made it home. He collapsed onto his couch, utterly exhausted. So much had happened today. Just then, his sister emerged, towel drying her hair, and bluntly asked if he came home late on purpose to rack up extra pay, also questioning why he hadn't changed his clothes. Max explained he needed to wash first, to which she reminded him his pay was all-inclusive, so no overtime pay for him. She then casually asked if he could do a dessert open run at Gyeongju Station for her tomorrow, a new bakery cafe that had just opened, adding it wasn't like he had plans or anything. Max seethed internally, wondering if that was really something to say to her younger brother, who came home past midnight. His sister, with a sweet smile, reasoned the weather was nice, so she was helping him get some fresh air and a walk, even mentioning she'd seen pretty cherry blossoms by Tanshan earlier. The mention of cherry blossoms made Max consider, just for a second, if he should seriously fight her. A flash of joy giving him cherry blossom petals crossed his mind. He sighed in defeat. "Just send the address," he mumbled. His sister, delighted, exclaimed, "Whoa, for real? Really? This is awesome." The next morning, the sun shone brightly. Max found himself outside a modern building with a long queue of people. He looked at a photo of cherry blossoms he'd taken earlier on the way, admitting they really were pretty. But the wait time for the cafe was insane, so that's why his sister had made him come instead, sacrificing his precious Saturday morning. He grumbled, checking his phone, when it suddenly vibrated with an incoming call from Code and Canvas Jang, CHRINJOY. Max stared at his screen, utterly bewildered by the timing. From the other end, Joy's voice, or what he imagined it to be from the contact name, cheerfully wondered what name he had saved her under, LOL. Her own phone displayed, she was calling local Songnam boy Dong Ji-yu. She then appeared beside him, holding up her phone, teasingly asking if his saved name for her wasn't way too different from what she had for him. Max was completely stunned. This, he stammered. Joy, beaming, exclaimed, "Whoa, you must really like desserts," then looked around at the queue, innocently asking why she was there. Joy, holding a tray laden with pastries, asked if Max was there on an errand from his sister, commenting on their sweet sibling relationship and remarking she'd never do that for her own sibling. She then explained that there were many events at nearby cafes during the dessert festa, and since she lived nearby and knew the place would open, she thought he might like that kind of thing. Max recalled her mentioning she lived nearby. Joy continued, saying the cherry blossoms at Tanshan were really pretty, and she took a bunch of photos on her way, just as Max carried his own tray of desserts. Max remembered his own words from the previous day about Joy living near Gyeongju Station and Tanshan being close, where the cherry blossoms were nice. He briefly wondered if she was there because of what he'd said, but quickly dismissed it, telling himself not to overthink. As they walked, Joy noted it was almost noon and asked if Donggu had eaten. He then mentioned he'd be eating with his parents nearby soon. Joy feigned disappointment, saying he was going to ask if she wanted to eat together, and she playfully asked if he wasn't lying because he felt uncomfortable. Max, who internally admitted he just hated eating alone, quickly denied it. Joy, with a laugh, said she was just kidding and would see him next week. A little later, around 12:02 p.m., Max checked his family group chat. His dad had messaged that his sister slipped in the bathroom again and he was taking her to the ER. His mom then messaged, apologizing and suggesting they postpone dinner. His sister, Kang Soo-hyun, dramatically typed, "Feels like I'm gonna die." Max stared at his phone, a blank expression on his face. He ended up at a local eatery called Our Neighborhood Snacks, thinking maybe he should have just eaten with Joy. He reasoned she had more time off than him and probably would have paid, then grumbled as he ate his noodles and kimbap alone. But he quickly changed his mind, deciding it would have been awkward and eating alone was way better. Suddenly, he felt a prickling sensation, as if he were being watched. He looked up and saw Joy standing there, looking a bit surprised. Her expression then turned a little flat as she stared at him. She then quickly turned and walked away, leaving Max to mutter out outside the same Our Neighborhood Snack sign. The weekend passed, and it is Monday at Code and Canvas. Max noticed Joy from a distance, looking at his phone. She was unusually quiet today, tapping away at her keyboard with a somber expression. Max was sure of it. She was sulking. Joy, meanwhile, was convinced he must think she ignored him on purpose that day at the snack shop. Max agonized over whether he should show her the Messenger app and explain the situation with his sister, but then wondered if that was a bit much, his hand hovering over his phone. He sighed, hating dealing with emotions at work, and briefly wondered how many vacation days he had left. Then a horrifying realization struck him. They had their study group after work today, and it was the first session. His calendar app starkly displayed Study Group Session 1. Crap, he internally wailed, collapsing onto a bench in the company pantry, much to the confusion of a passing colleague. He considered pretending he had to work late and postpone, but as he walked past Patrick's desk, Patrick cheerfully thanked him for covering last week and told him to take it easy and go home on time. Max internally fumed, thinking that Jerk only acted nice at times like these. Max decided he needed to bring it up with Joy. It was best to clear up misunderstandings quickly. He approached her desk. Joy, about seeing you at the snack shop this weekend." Before he could finish, a colleague with glasses, a junior member of the team, interrupted, telling Joy that Esther had taken sudden leave today, so Joy would need to join the meeting with her instead. Joy, smiling, replied, "Ah, yes. It's in 5 minutes, right?" The junior colleague confirmed, and then asked Max if he wasn't about to say something. Max, flustered and his opportunity lost, denied it. The colleague looked puzzled, but said okay. Max felt like he was going crazy. Later, at a once-in-place coffee and dessert, the study group commenced, held at a cafe to avoid coworkers. They started by comparing the side project ideas they had worked on over the weekend, surrounded by tempting images of strawberry chocolate whipped cream cake, blueberry yogurt cake, and a decaf cafe latte. Unlike their company job, which only required delivering requested features, this project had to be led independently from A to Z, offering a learning experience they couldn't get in the office. As Joy suggested they settle on a dating app and list the required features by the weekend, Max was lost in thought, sipping his coffee. Joy called his name, Donggu, startling him into a "why yes." She observed that he seemed really tired today and wasn't focused at the office either. Max mumbled an excuse. Joy then bluntly asked, "Is it because I saw you eating alone on Saturday?" causing Max to nearly choke on his coffee with a PFFF. Crap, it was here, he thought. What should he say? He mumbled an apology. Joy looked at him, surprised. She explained that she's usually high energy and naturally outgoing, so sometimes she comes off as overwhelming to others. She admitted she'd asked him to eat together without thinking much, but then realized it might have made him uncomfortable. Max was silent for a moment. As Joy looked at her phone, Max, looking at his own phone, stated he didn't feel uncomfortable. He then showed her his family group chat, revealing his sister's bathroom mishap and the canceled dinner plans. It really was just a simple canceled plan. His parents suddenly had an emergency, he explained. Joy asked why he didn't tell her right away through a call or message. Max explained it was the weekend and contacting her about that. Joy then asked about telling her at the office today. Max replied that she seemed busy all day. Joy placed her hand on the table, declaring it mutual fault. Then, with a sly look, she added, "But I think, Dong-gu, you're a little more at fault." Max asked, "How so?" Joy exclaimed, her voice full of mock distress. "Do you know how much I worried all weekend?" She had wondered if she'd overstepped or if he was just being polite and actually uncomfortable. Max, looking a bit sheepish, noted she sure did overthink despite appearances. He mumbled, "Not really, but sorry." Joy, with a mischievous glint in her eye, declared, "If you're sorry, buy me food." Max, eager to make amends, quickly agreed. "Ah, yes. Of course. Do you like chicken?" Joy, after a moment's thought, said she did, actually. A ding sounded from Max's phone as he quickly ordered fried chicken via a delivery app. Joy started giggling, almost unable to contain her laughter, as Max nervously asked if it wasn't a good menu choice. "No, LOL, it's my favorite," Joy replied, beaming. "Thanks for the meal." Max let out a sigh of relief. Joy gave a small, satisfied smile. Study group day 1 was perhaps safely completed at a Once place. The towering office buildings stood against the sky. After a hectic weekend and Monday, Max yawned, walking down a hallway. He had hoped Tuesday would be emotion-free, but nope. He found himself outside meeting room 3. Inside, Mickey, the business development team leader, was gushing about how hard the commerce team was working, even giving them supporting staff like Esther and Andrew, telling them not to feel too pressured as the real work started in 3 weeks. Max internally cringed at the forced cheerfulness. Mickey continued, saying today was just a preview, and if they had questions, they should just DM our Andrew, Esther's ex. Mickey then asked if everyone was okay. Esther replied, "Oh, of course, haha," tapping her fingers on the table. Max, however, was internally screaming, his mind a flurry of panic typing. His internal monologue was a desperate stream of ta-da-da-da-da and "save me" as he furiously typed on his laptop, trying to look busy and avoid eye contact with the drama unfolding around him, thinking, why is my life a sitcom? The following Tuesday at 10:34 a.m., Max received a message from Esther. She thought this was as far as she could go and was going to submit her resignation. Max stared at his laptop screen, a dark cloud seemingly forming over him as he processed the news. He couldn't understand why she was really quitting just because she broke up with someone at work, especially since they weren't even on the same team and their work hours likely wouldn't overlap, making it easy to avoid each other. He just didn't get it, remembering Esther's tear-streaked face from that night. He let out a frustrated sigh. He quickly chastised himself. "No, Kong Dong-gu, mind your own business. Stay out of other people's affairs," he thought, physically pinching his cheeks as if to force the thought away. His role was to stay silent. Nothing more, nothing less. He was basically the Switzerland of office drama. Suddenly, Esther herself appeared, startling him by asking what he was doing, causing him to yelp, "WHH." She teased him, asking why he was so startled and accusing him of pretending to work while actually slacking off. Max denied it, but Esther, with a knowing whatever you say, beckoned him to follow her. They ended up at the familiar SU convenience store. Esther, with a flourish, announced it was payback for last Friday and told Max to pick anything he wanted to eat. Max, grabbing his sandwich, thought he was at least saving up on lunch today, but then asked if her earlier message about resigning was true. Esther, looking through the snack aisle, quoted an old saying, "If you don't like the temple, the monks should leave," wondering aloud how one could work while seeing that person at the office. She then casually mentioned she had a meeting scheduled with Donald at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Max was shocked by her nonchalance. He started to say that even so, quitting all of a sudden was just, but Esther quickly shushed him, putting a finger to her lips. Andrew, Esther's ex, was on the phone nearby, telling someone to keep it a secret for now. Max caught a snippet of the conversation. Andrew was denying it was Esther's ex-boyfriend, claiming they just broke up recently, and he should at least pretend to be reflecting. He then mentioned he'd post about something on SNS later, as Esther crouched down, overwhelmed by an aisle of instant noodles, while Max sat on a crate, awkwardly watching. A bead of sweat trickled down Max's temple. Esther looked up at him, her eyes pleading. Max silently understood. This marked the beginning of episode 10, subtitled Line. Max and Esther were sitting on a bench under a canopy, some distance from the convenience store. Esther apologized, saying she really meant to buy everything for him, but kind of rushed out. Max assured her it was fine. She then noticed a vending machine and offered to at least get him a drink, but Max said she only drank zero-calorie drinks or nothing at all. She ended up getting him a bottle of water. Esther, taking the bottle, suggested, "Then how about this?" As they sat, Max trying bottled water from a vending machine for the first time. Esther then asked if Max knew about Andrew's earlier phone call. Max confirmed he sort of did, remembering Andrew holding a can of Monster Energy drink. Max, aghast, asked if she kept seeing Andrew even though she knew he was cheating. Esther wasn't sure if it was cheating or just rebounding, explaining Andrew had a female friend he was close with even before they started dating, some junior from his old job or whatever. She admitted she just kept suspecting things. She had a hunch, but no real proof, nervously fiddling with her water bottle. She had been following that girl on a secondary SNS account, and last weekend, exactly 2 days after she and Andrew broke up, the girl posted a picture of a bouquet at a restaurant. Esther then added, with a strained laugh, that she was the one who told Andrew about that restaurant, calling it crazy. Max agreed it seemed like it. Esther took a large gulp of water, her eyes determined. She then asked Max to just pretend he didn't see or hear anything this time either. Max, internally noting her sudden switch to casual speech, was reminded of their pinky promise. Esther gave him a small, knowing smile. Max simply replied, "Yeah," thinking to himself that this was right. Sometimes, silence is the biggest form of consideration, like when you pretend not to hear your stomach rumble during a quiet meeting. The vending machine hummed nearby. Back at his desk, Max clicked his mouse, but couldn't shake a feeling of frustration, wondering why it felt so unsatisfying. Joy, noticing his mood, leaned over and asked Donggu, quickly correcting herself to Max, if something was going on, offering him a sugar recharge. Max, flustered, claimed it was nothing. He looked at the small, wrapped candy Joy had given him. Max then mused aloud that it wasn't like he was responsible for someone else's choices, so meddling recklessly would just be irresponsible, right? Max, startled by her directness, internally berated himself for even thinking of saying something so random. Joy, with a bright smile, said, well, if that's how Max sees it, then maybe that's just how it is." Max thought that answering seriously just made it even more embarrassing, mumbling that what he just said. Joy, however, told him she thought it was okay to express honest feelings. She reminded him of when he told her she was admirable, recalling his words about the way she never settled. She pointed out that even back then, he didn't really offer her advice or opinions. She concluded that she didn't know what was going on, but maybe his approach was more than enough. Max looked down, a bead of sweat on his temple. Later, in the women's restroom, Esther was freshening up when her phone, placed on the counter among her cosmetics, buzzed. It was a message from Max at 2:15 p.m. "Is it okay if we talk privately for a moment?" Esther looked puzzled, holding her makeup compact. Max waited by the emergency exit. Esther called out to him. She asked what this was all of a sudden, wondering if he was bored and jokingly suggesting they grab coffee with Joy, maybe slacking off. Max remained silent, looking down as Esther approached. Esther asked, "Max?" Max then spoke, his voice firm, stating that Andrew was the one who did wrong, so he didn't understand why Esther was the one leaving the company. Esther was taken aback. "Where did that come from?" she asked as Max took a step forward. He clarified that getting hurt was one thing, but he just didn't get why she was the one taking the loss. Esther stared at him, speechless, her gaze unwavering. She admitted she didn't expect him to say something like this. They stood in the dim light of the stairwell. Esther confessed that this past month, every time she saw Andrew at the office, it felt like her heart dropped. She would feel overwhelmed out of nowhere, cry in a restroom on a different floor, fix her makeup, and then act like nothing happened at her desk. She had just started questioning if this was really how she was supposed to keep working. Max listened, remembering Joy's earlier words. "It's okay to express your honest feelings." Max told Esther that honestly, it didn't matter to him what she decided. It was her career and her life. But, he added, he just hated how that shameless, selfish guy got to benefit from her sacrifice. Even if Andrew didn't get punished for it, Max hoped Esther would end up doing better than him in every way. That was all there was to it, he concluded, looking away. Esther, her voice soft, asked why he would go out of his way to say all this. Muck's gaze sharpened. He remembered their earlier conversation, Esther's skills as a UX/UI designer who understood dev language. He replied that UX/UI designers who understood dev language weren't exactly common, then quickly amended, "No, I just believe you're really good at your job." A glint of light caught Esther's teardrop pendant. The green emergency exit sign glowed steadily nearby. Esther sniffled slightly, then looked at him with a hesitant, Tears welled in Esther's eyes as she looked at him, a single tear escaping. Max, flustered, thought, "Didn't I do exactly what Joy told me to?" Max was utterly flustered as Esther stood before him, tears welling up. He stammered her name, wondering if he had somehow caused her distress as she wiped her eyes. To his surprise, Esther suddenly declared it was so annoying, which left Max even more confused, exclaiming, "Huh?" She clarified it was annoying because she felt comforted, a statement that made Max jump, thinking she had scared him. Composing herself, Esther looked at him with a lingering tear, then announced, 2 weeks, leaving Max to question what she meant. She explained that if she still felt the same after 2 weeks, she would submit her resignation then, and with a peace sign, she headed up the stairs. She turned back with a wink, asking if they should go up. Max, still processing the sudden shift, agreed with a hesitant yes. He wondered if this could be considered a good outcome. The green exit sign glowing nearby. He felt a wave of relief, thinking now he could finally focus on work. However, as they reached the elevator landing, they ran into Joy, Patrick, Jaden, and their junior colleague with braids, all waiting. Jaden, with a surprised look, pointed out Esther and Max, which caused both of them to tense up, Esther instinctively raising a hand to her face. Joy turned, her expression shifting from surprise to curiosity, mirroring the others' gazes. The junior colleague looked down, while Patrick and Jaden observed them silently. Joy announced she was heading to a cafe and invited Patrick and Jaden, but Esther quickly declined, saying, "I'm good," and practically teleported away, leaving Max aghast at her swift escape, wondering if she was seriously bailing on him like that. Talk about a strategic retreat. Joy then asked about Max, but Jaden interjected loudly that Max couldn't drink caffeine, making Max internally fume. "Should I kill him for real?" Max hastily excused himself, claiming he had to check some work, and said he'd see them later. Joy watched him leave with a thoughtful expression. Thus began episode 11, subtitled Boundary. At 3:10 p.m., Max was back at his desk, but found he couldn't stop thinking about the earlier encounter. He couldn't focus, even though his hands typed away automatically, a familiar state for any seasoned office worker. He imagined his colleagues at the cafe, speculating wildly about him and Esther. The thought of weird rumors spreading, like him confessing to Esther or worse, being creepy, made him shudder. Absolutely not. He thought. He briefly considered trying to clear things up with Joy, but then froze, realizing he had no idea what he would even say. He pictured himself insanely boasting about teaching Esther a lesson, a thought that sounded completely bonkers. No, Calm down, Kong Donggu, he told himself, resorting to searching how to mind control on Woogle, trying to convince himself that people don't usually care that much about other people's business. He attempted some self-soothing mind control, stay positive, and breathe deeply. Just then, Patrick leaned over his monitor, asking with a knowing look, "Max, is there something between you and Esther?" Max internally screamed, "Fuck, Muckschfeind ignorance esking Esther." "What?" Patrick explained. It just looked like she was crying earlier. Max, acting surprised, exclaimed, "What? Esther was?" Patrick, with a bright smile, mused that he thought maybe they fought because the design files were delayed, his voice far too loud for Max's comfort, who wished Patrick would ask about such things more quietly. Now everyone was staring, and Max felt the pressure to say something to defuse the situation. Just in the nick of time, Esther approached Joy's desk, asking if they could postpone their meeting by 15 minutes because she needed to go to the pharmacy. Joy asked if Esther was sick. Esther, with a slight wink, explained that her eyes got dry and super irritated, and she just needed to buy some eye drops quickly, subtly hinting she had been crying. She then turned to Max, thanking him for earlier, for helping her find her access card. Max, caught off guard, stammered, "Huh? Oh, sure." Patrick, still intrigued, remarked that he thought something was going on between them, while Esther gave a small, enigmatic smile. Max tried to laugh it off as a misunderstanding with Esther, relieved he had survived the impromptu interrogation. Joy observed them with a quiet, unreadable expression, remaining silent for a moment. Later, Max found himself at App Coffee, feeling like he'd been wasting emotions for no reason all day. He held his waiting number, 053, for a packaged apple chamomile tea, resolving to avoid getting unnecessarily involved with his coworkers from now on, especially with Esther and Joy, those two in particular. Just thinking about it stressed him out, as his tea was called. He grabbed his drink, needing to calm down fast. "Oh, Mux." Joy's voice startled him, making him yelp, "KYH." He was shocked to see her there. Joy, noticing his chamomile tea, asked why he wasn't making it himself in the office pantry, a valid question since he was the office tea connoisseur. Max mumbled about wanting to cool off and get some fresh air. Joy explained she had a dessert coupon that was expiring tomorrow and had rushed over to use it. She gave him a knowing, almost mischievous smile. Max considered leaving first to avoid further interaction, but then told Joy to go ahead. However, Joy declared she was bored anyway, and this was perfect. She then brightly suggested they go back in together, much to Max's internal groan. As they walked, Joy asked if Max was coming to the company dinner the next day. Max replied he'd probably just stay for the first round and asked about her plans. Joy was silent for a moment, prompting a questioning look from Max. Then, turning to him, she asked, "Max, by the way, do you still feel a bit awkward around me?" Max was taken aback by the suddenness of her question, stammering, "What do you mean all of a sudden?" Joy elaborated, pointing out that he naturally called Esther by her nickname, but always added nim, a Korean honorific suffix, when saying Joy's name, even though it was her real name. Max, looking pensive, wondered if he really did that. As Joy added, she was just curious if there was a particular reason. Joy reminded him that when he first sat next to her, she had told him to drop the honorifics and acknowledged it definitely felt awkward back then. Max explained that, like with Patrick and Joy, since they were in the same role, they had to communicate more often. He thought that by keeping formalities in their titles, it might reduce the chances of making mistakes when talking. Joy summarized his point. The closer you are, the more carefully you have to maintain some distance. Max agreed it was something like that. He then added, as they continued walking, that also, since they were doing a study group together, for him, Joy was the closest person at the company. Joy looked at him, her expression unreadable as a gentle breeze rustled the leaves nearby, a single leaf fluttering down. Max sipped his tea, then immediately cringed internally, thinking, gasp, what I just said sounds kind of weird. Joy was quiet for another moment, then said that somehow, compared to what she was expecting, it sounded way deeper, and that it was interesting, leaving Max utterly bewildered by her reaction. Interesting how? As leaves swirled around them, Joy mused that somehow, compared to what she was expecting, Max's explanation sounded way deeper. She found it interesting. Max, flushing, wondered internally, interesting how? Joy, noticing his reaction, quickly backpedaled, saying she was just curious and that they had just been chatting and arrived there fast. Right? Max mumbled an yes. As they reach a crosswalk, he internally sighed, thinking Joy really did find everything interesting and got curious about anything, as he excused himself to the men's restroom. Alone, Max splashed water on his face, reflecting that if he were younger and the type who didn't know his place, he definitely would have misunderstood Joy's kindness, letting his imagination run wild. The candy Joy had given him earlier sat on his desk next to his mouse, a small reminder. Joy was someone kind to everyone and curious about everything, he thought, recalling her interactions with Jaden. He decided it was better for his mental health to let her comments go in one ear and out the other, not reading into them. Better keep your guard up from now on, Kong Donggu, he resolved, putting on his headphones as if to physically block out further misinterpretations. A lone light bulb glowed overhead. 2 days later, a well-dressed man, who Patrick greeted enthusiastically as Ace, walked into the office. Max, headphones around his neck, looked up with a questioning glance. Patrick clapped the man on the shoulder, saying it had been a long time and that he'd thought he was going to die from exhaustion, also complimenting his wedding photos. Max observed them with a neutral expression. The newcomer, known by the nickname Leo, had apparently just returned to headquarters after a 9-month assignment. Patrick then mentioned the team dinner that night and invited Leo, who laughingly asked if he could really join. Max, overhearing, noted that just from a glance, Leo seemed socially adept. Leo then approached Joy's desk, greeting her with a "Hey there," and asking if she wasn't going to say hi. Joy, surprised, exclaimed about when he got there and that his hair was different. Max observed that Leo seemed to have joined the company around the same time as Joy, and they appeared really close. Leo then turned to Max, introducing himself and saying he'd heard Max was good at his job, also noting he sat next to Joy. Max politely thanked him. Leo then jokingly called Joy a total crumb machine when she ate snacks and told Max he owed her a lot, asking him to take care of her. Joy, flustered, told Leo to stop bothering Max, who was working, and shoot him away. Max thought Leo was a classic extrovert, unbeknownst to shyness, while Joy told Max not to mind him, as he was always like that. Leo then expressed mock sadness that Joy was on the commerce team now. Joy retorted that he should have treated her better when he had the chance. Leo then invited Joy to join the finance team for coffee later, saying he'd text her. Max, overhearing, subtly put his headphones back on, a silent signal of his disinterest in the unfolding social drama. That evening, the team gathered at a bustling Korean barbecue restaurant, with Joy, Leo, Patrick, and Jaden at one table, lively with conversation and clinking glasses. Max sat at another table with Esther, both quietly eating. At Joy's table, Leo mentioned there were rumors about Joy switching teams before and, more pointedly, that there were rumors they were dating, adding honestly that they'd make a cute couple. Max, sipping his zero-calorie cola, overheard this, noting that it didn't feel like either of them would be out of the other's league. Leo continued, saying he heard Joy was even doing a master's after work, calling her amazing in her own way. Esther then asked Max what he thought, specifically about Leo and Joy, if they suited each other. Max, caught off guard, asked, About what? He then hesitantly replied that he guessed they suited each other more than Jaden did. Esther burst out laughing, agreed. The company dinner eventually wound down, the restaurant lights casting a warm glow into the night. Max, exhausted, thought company dinners really drained one's energy and just wanted to go home and lie down. As he stepped outside, he saw Joy crouching by some crates on her phone. "Oh, it's you, Max," she exclaimed. Joy, realizing they were outside work, asked if she should call him Donggu. Max, ever the pragmatist, replied that since this was still part of the work dinner, Max was fine, prompting Joy to laugh and remark that, as expected, he was very clear about boundaries. Max said he just stepped out for fresh air and asked about Joy. She explained she was taking a work call, as apparently the QA team was still working late. Max noted her dedication, handling work during dinner, as Joy finished her call. Joy then stood up, mentioning her face was red from getting tipsy fast and worried about her hangover, musing about grabbing chocolate milk on the way home. Max confirmed her face was indeed red. When Max questioned the chocolate milk, Joy explained that since he didn't drink alcohol, he wouldn't know that chocolate milk is amazing for hangovers, and she absolutely loved it. Patrick then called out to Joy, saying everyone was waiting for her and that Haley was totally drunk too, telling her to take her time coming back in. Max watched Joy re-enter the restaurant and join Leo at their table. Leo suggested round 2 at a cocktail bar, and Joy recognized the place, saying she thought she saw it on Instagram. Max lingered outside for a moment, thinking that if Leo had gotten back from his assignment earlier, maybe those two would have done the study group together instead. As Max stood alone, his phone beeped. It was a text from Esther at 7:34 p.m. Max, let's hit the convenience store. He was momentarily puzzled. Soon, they were outside the familiar GU convenience store. Esther, with a playful grin, declared, Finally, just the two of us left. Max told her not to say things that could be misunderstood, but Esther just found his reaction funny. She then asked what it was he was going to say the other day, but Max didn't recall. Esther reminded him about their conversation on the emergency stairs about developer terms and UX/UI designers. Much clarifying. Ow. I said that like Esther. It's rare to find a UX/UI designer who understands developer terms. That's basically what I meant. Esther burst into laughter, finding his Max-like compliment hilarious, leaving Max wondering what a Max-like compliment even was. He asked if she dragged him to the convenience store just to ask that. Esther explained she was buying hangover drinks for everyone anyway and had something she wanted to say to him. To me, Max questioned. Esther then thanked him for the other day, feeling she hadn't thanked him properly. Max admitted he hadn't really been thinking about it much. Esther then put a hand on his arm and said if he ever had a tough time, he should come to her. With a dramatic flourish, she declared, I'll gladly be your trash can, which made Max snort with laughter. Esther, flustered, insisted she was serious, asking if he understood she meant an emotional trash can. Max, still chuckling, confirmed that was what he thought she meant. He then mused that it was kind of weird, not that she'd fix his problems, but just be his emotional trash can. He found that amusing. Esther, slightly miffed, said she didn't know his sense of humor was so unique, adding that while solving things was his job, having someone just be there for you could be enough sometimes. Her eyes twinkled. Max suddenly looked intently at Esther, who asked what was wrong, if she had something on her face. Esther then observed that she thought this was the first time she'd ever seen him really laugh, even though they'd worked together for a year. Max asked, Oh, is that so? Esther, shining, confirmed he looked way better when he smiled, less gloomy too. Gloomy? Max mumbled, looking slightly embarrassed. Esther, seeing his reaction, teased, You're embarrassed. Max grumbled internally, thinking she was definitely teasing him. He silently regretted following her. As Joy was seen back at the restaurant table, her expression thoughtful, Max's empty stool beside her. Joy continued to gaze into his stool, lost in thought. Esther leaned in, teasing Max that he was so shy. Max, with an internal groan, just wanted the interaction to end. He reminded her that she came to buy things for everyone and urged her to choose something quickly. Esther mused that hangover drinks were boring. Max observed her, thinking she was experiencing major decision paralysis as she wondered between ice cream or a sports drink. After a moment, Esther pointed towards the GU convenience store sign, suggesting, How about that one? Back with the group, Esther cheerfully announced everyone should take one chocolate milk carton before they headed to the second round. She then loudly declared, for everyone's information, that this was Max's pick, absolving herself of responsibility if it tasted bad. Colleagues thanked Max, while some questioned if he really chose it. Leo then asked Max if he was coming to the second round, but Max, a bit awkwardly, stated he was only planning to stay for the first. Leo remarked it was too bad, as the cocktail bar had non-alcoholic options too. Max, flustered, suggested they grab tea together next time, a classic maybe later maneuver. Esther then whispered to Leo, loud enough for Max to hear, that he knew Max's suggestion was a Korean-style promise, right? Leo looked confused, while Max internally cringed, wishing Esther would keep it down. As they were about to leave, the junior colleague with braids told Joy she had set something aside for her, which turned out to be a different brand of chocolate milk, a fancier one. Joy exclaimed her love for it. Max glanced at Joy, as Esther subtly looked away. The next morning, under a bright sky above the office buildings, Patrick approached Max's desk, asking if he was busy. Max replied he wasn't and asked if something was wrong. Patrick explained that the satellite office Leo used needed some equipment brought back from the car, but Jaden, who was supposed to help, was hung over and unreachable, because apparently work commitments are optional when you've partied too hard. Patrick then asked if Max could help instead, mentioning it was near Sealong Station and shouldn't take more than 3 hours. Max, feeling the pressure, internally sighed, "I see," wondering if they were seriously dumping this on him too. He considered saying no, his gaze briefly flicking towards Joy, who looked back with a questioning glance. But, as usual, Max found himself agreeing, muttering that he guessed he didn't have a choice. Leo and Patrick thanked him profusely, while Max weakly replied it was no problem. Ugh, why can't I say no? Max berated himself as he walked off with Leo. Leo then remembered the cake shop Joy liked near Sealong, pulling up a map on his phone and asking Joy if that was the one. He then offered to grab some for her. Joy, her eyes sparkling, asked, "Really?" Leo, seeing an opportunity to be mildly helpful, offered to get it since he was going anyway, though Joy initially hesitated, not wanting to bother him. Leo then suggested Max bring some for the team too. Max, with a sigh only he could hear, agreed again, just wanted to run home instead of on errands. Down in the parking garage, at Gate B, Level B1, Leo handed Max a decaf coffee as they got into the car, mentioning Joy had told him Max preferred it. Max thanked him, wondering what those two even chatted about. Leo then shared that Patrick had been praising Max a lot, saying that even though it was only Max's second year, his coding skills were mid-level or higher. Max chuckled, wondering what Patrick had been saying. Leo then started his car, revealing that after hearing the praise, he'd thought if there was a chance before he quit, he'd love to collaborate with Max at least once. Max, surprised, asked if Leo was quitting. Leo clarified it wouldn't be immediate, but he was planning to gradually. A friend of his had recently started a startup and offered him a position. He was thinking about it seriously once he wrapped up his master's degree, especially since they'd had some decent success with funding. Max remembered Leo mentioning his master's course. He noted Leo seemed a bit older and was already driving an import car, a shiny BMW. Max then asked if Leo didn't want to move to a bigger company, like a unicorn startup. Leo, adjusting his driving glasses, replied that a company where everything was already set up wouldn't be fun. Rather than just windows or chimneys, he wanted to help build the pillars. Max gulped, thinking Leo was even cooler than he looked, as Leo smoothly pulled the car away from the curb. Leo then asked Max what kind of environment he wanted to work in later. Max, surprised to be asked, hesitated, then honestly admitted that after building some experience, he'd like to freelance, as he didn't want to be tied down by organizations or people. He immediately worried if that sounded too much like a social misfit. To his surprise, Leo called his goal admirable, noting that talented freelancers can name their price. Max mumbled a thank you. Leo then asked Max to keep their talk a secret, especially from the commerce team. Max, slightly confused, agreed. A moment later, Max hesitantly asked if they hadn't passed the same alley 3 times now, as a no parking sign looked awfully familiar. Leo exclaimed, "Wait, that building, we saw it earlier? What the heck?" After many twists and turns, they finally loaded everything into the car and made it to the dessert gallery cafe. Joy was supposed to text what she wanted, but there had been no word, possibly because she was in a meeting. Max wondered if he should just buy whatever was most popular. He then spotted a particular cake in the display case, thinking that one would be best, an elegant Oreo cheesecake. Back at the office, Joy gasped in delight upon seeing the cake. She exclaimed it was always sold out when she came on weekends and wondered how they got one. Explaining she couldn't call because of her meeting, Leo smoothly replied that her colleague must have really good instincts or be very thoughtful. Looking pointedly at Max, Joy, surprised, said, "Max picked it." She watched Max quietly head back to his desk. Then a moment later, a thoughtful expression crossed her face. Max sat down, his headphones around his neck, and started working. Soon, a paper cup appeared on his desk, containing a slice of the Oreo cake. "What's this?" he asked. Joy explained it was cake for him, apologizing for only having a paper cup and spilling some powder, which she offered to clean. Max said he was fine with it. Joy beamed, saying good things should be shared, and handed him a fork. Max thanked her. He took a bite, noting it wasn't as sweet as he expected, while Joy watched him, a slight smile playing on her lips. Later, the junior colleague showed Joy the special chocolate milk Esther had set aside for her earlier, mentioning that Max had chosen it, which seemed surprising, as he seemed like he'd like chocolate milk. Joy looked at the carton, a question in her eyes as she wondered if Max was leaving. She recalled Esther saying chocolate milk was a perfect hangover cure and that she was a total chocoholic. As Max prepared to leave for the day, Patrick and Esther were also heading out. Joy watched them. Max announced he'd head out first, explaining it was because of the bus schedule. Joy watched him go, mumbling to herself that she thought he was more thoughtful than he let on. Max, still at his desk, took another bite of the cake. Joy coughed pointedly, then looked at him with a thoughtful, almost sly smile, silently wondering if she could eat the snack or what. The code and canvas sign marked the beginning of another workday. Max, however, felt a strange sensation, noting that compared to most people, he was ridiculously sensitive to caffeine. He clutched his chest, feeling his heart racing faster than usual. A sudden, sharp realization hit him as he looked at the Simic coffee cup on his desk. No way, he thought, a jolt going through him. He frantically checked the lid. There was no decaf label. Just then, Patrick walked over, holding a similar coffee cup, and asked if Max's drink got switched, remarking that no wonder his tasted so weak. Joy, overhearing from her desk, looked concerned, reminding Patrick that Max couldn't have caffeine and asking Max if he was okay. Patrick casually apologized, saying he'd by next time. Max tried to play it cool, insisting that much was fine, but internally he cursed as his heart continued to pound. Damn. His day was off to a rough start, his eyes twitching from the unwelcome caffeine surge. This was the start of episode 14, titled Raindrop, as Joy sat at a bus stop, an umbrella by her side. Back in the office, Max was already feeling the caffeine's effects, his company messenger pinging relentlessly. Haley asked if he'd checked the updated design files as they weren't on the test server yet, to which Max replied he'd get it done before lunch. Then Jaden messaged that the VOC review request was still pending, and Max promised to check it right away. Finally, Patrick informed him there was a bug in the code he pushed, which Patrick had fixed, prompting a mortified apology from Max. He felt utterly overwhelmed, his fingers flying across the keyboard at a speed that would make a caffeinated squirrel jealous. He let out an internal scream as he typed furiously, clearly overstimulated from the caffeine overload, while Joy watched him with a neutral expression. Joy leaned over, observing that Max looked swamped, and kindly offered to split the workload with him. Max, however, insisted he was fine, stating it was his responsibility and that he couldn't be a burden to others. Joy simply smiled faintly in response. Shortly after, Leo approached Joy, asking about her lunch plans as the old settlement team was getting together. Joy agreed to come by later. She glanced towards Max with a hint of concern before leaving. Max continued to work, his fingers a blur, while Joy looked thoughtful for a moment before heading out. The office around them was quiet. Max managed to put out the biggest fire, sighing in relief. He then noticed the time on his phone, 12:35 p.m., Tuesday, April 30th. Lunchtime had already arrived, time flying by too quickly. The morning had been a blur. He decided to get some chamomile tea to calm his mind and body, but upon reaching the tea box in the pantry, he found it empty, much to his dismay. His only option was to head to the app coffee outside the building. As he picked up his order 98, "Your apple chamomile tea is ready," the barista called out. Max thought that nothing was going right today. He felt a slight headache, wondering if it was the caffeine. Leaving the cafe, he glanced out the window and realized it was raining, and he hadn't brought an umbrella. It won't rain, right? He'd hoped earlier, a feeling of unease now settling in. Back in the office, two female colleagues walked by, chatting, one of them looking questioningly at the other. Max, still jittery, nearly spilled his tea as they passed, startling them. By 5:08 p.m., the day was almost gone, spent handling cross-team requests. Considering the inevitable caffeine crash, Max decided it would be more efficient to tackle his main tasks tomorrow, his heart still thumping uncomfortably as his colleagues whispered nearby. He announced he was heading out early, pressing the elevator button for the 10th floor. Adjusting his schedule to match his energy was a core office survival skill, he mused. He was thrilled for his first early leave in ages, planning to rest with all his might. However, as he stepped outside, he was met with a downpour. Seriously, what kind of day is this? He thought as the wind howled. He had a pile of umbrellas at home. Why did it always rain on days like this when he forgot one? He stood there, momentarily defeated. Suddenly, Joy appeared beside him, holding an umbrella, and asked if he needed to share. She gave him a sly smile. Max was taken aback, and before he could fully process, she was pulling him under the umbrella, asking if he was sorry. "Huh," he managed. Joy explained she'd been practicing small talk lately, chattering on as they walked, while Max felt like he could use another skill besides his side project. "How did this happen?" he wondered. "I was totally fine alone." Joy cheerfully told him it was just a short walk to the stop, but Max groaned internally. He felt like he was bothering her, wondering if he should have just walked in the rain. Joy then thanked him for the chocolate cake from yesterday, asking if he picked it. Max explained the clerk said it was a bestseller. Joy laughed, saying she thought he chose it because he liked chocolate. Max exclaimed, "What?" and Joy admitted she was kidding. Then, she playfully told him to hold the umbrella better as she was getting wet. She quickly added, "That was a joke too," as the umbrella was a bit small for two. Max sighed, realizing she was really enjoying teasing him. They continued walking in the rain, Max glancing at Joy, his hand brushing hers slightly on the umbrella handle. He wondered when the bus stop would finally appear. The bus schedule display showed several buses arriving soon or in a few minutes. They reached the bus stop, another man already waiting. Max grumbled about why the buses were all late. Joy noted he had worked through lunch too and looked busy all day. Max confirmed with an yeah. Joy, concerned, asked if he skipped lunch and said she should have grabbed him a sandwich. Max weakly reassured her he was fine. He recalled Joy's earlier conversation with Leo, a thoughtful expression on his face. Joy then asked if he and Leo had been working together since the settlement team. Max confirmed they joined the company together over 3 years ago. 3 years, that's a long time. Joy mused, then paused, but she turned to him, asking why Leo. Max, surprised by the question, remembered their chat in the car and commented that Leo seemed amazing in many ways. Joy agreed. Leo's definitely different. She elaborated that Leo worked out, was super social, had a great reputation, and no rough edges. Kind of everyone's ideal. Then she added that personally, she liked the opposite type, someone soft, but who didn't show it, stronger on the inside than the outside. She paused, then looked at Max and said someone like, "You, Donggu." Both of them sat in stunned silence for a moment. Joy quickly backtracked, flustered, saying she meant for working together, someone like him suited her better. That was all. She waved her hands dismissively, insisting he shouldn't misunderstand. Seriously. Max, looking away, quietly told her he didn't misunderstand, not to worry. He thought to himself that it wasn't inner strength, just too much worry, and he kept things in because there was nothing to show. His inside wasn't much different from his outside. Just then, the bus arrival display updated. His bus, number 101, was arriving soon. He stood up, pulling his hood over his head, announcing his bus was here, so he'd head off first, thinking he'd probably never be able to say what was truly on his mind. Joy waved, thanking him for today and saying see you tomorrow. Max walked towards the arriving bus in the rain. Joy watched him leave, a pensive look on her face as raindrops streaked the bus stop window. On the bus, Max sat looking out the window. Joy's words echoed in his mind. Personally, I like the opposite type. Someone like you, Dongu. Suddenly, it felt like a weight had just lifted from his chest. Why, he wondered. As the bus pulled away, the rain stopped. Max took a deep breath, remembering his ridiculous sensitivity to caffeine. He exhaled slowly. Thump, thump. His heart pounded in his chest. Thump, thump, thump. This is because of the caffeine. He desperately tried to convince himself as his heart continued its frantic rhythm. Esther called out to Joy, asking if she'd be interested in a blind date. Joy and Max, both at their desks, looked up as Esther stood between them. Joy, surprised, questioned, a blind date. Esther explained that she'd posted on Instagram after their team dinner, and a senior from college saw it, and asked about Joy, thinking it would be great if she could introduce him. Esther then suggested they talk about the details over lunch later. Max seemingly unfazed, but internally processing the conversation. Esther's Instagram post, a selfie with Joy and the junior colleague, showed them enjoying dessert. Max mused that if you've got the looks, people will reach out one way or another. Later, Max and Joy walked down the street. Joy explaining the cafe they were heading to was down an alley on the left. It was a cafe run by a friend of hers, she added, acknowledging it was a bit far from the station. Max wondered if Joy was used to people showing interest just from SNS photos. Inside the cafe, Joy playfully asked her friend, the owner, if there was no special service for friends. The owner laughed, assuring her he'd give her something nice. Meanwhile, two guys at another table whispered about how stunning the girl at the counter, Joy, was, a common occurrence that probably went unnoticed by Joy herself. Max reflected that if it weren't for this job-switching study group, he'd never be sitting across from someone like Joy at a cafe as she waited for her coworker. Their table was adorned with a sweet treat and drinks under the warm cafe lighting. Joy, looking at her laptop, confirmed that, as Max said, the design files could be made open source, and then turned her attention to the gathered requirements. Max, meanwhile, found himself wondering if Joy was going on a blind date or not. His curiosity piqued. He told himself it was normal to be curious as a teammate. Just simple curiosity, nothing more, as he sent a message and declared they just needed to break down the points he sent via Messenger. He decided to ask casually, acting natural, about the blind date he thought he overheard her and Esther discussing, hoping it wasn't too random. Joy, surprised, asked if he was curious, a teasing glint in her eye. Max gulped, caught off guard. Joy then remarked that So Donggu heard that too. She thought he couldn't hear with his headset on. Max mumbled something as Joy took a bite of her dessert, and he internally urged her to reveal the verdict. After a moment, Joy looked up and Max hesitantly asked if she decided to go on it. Joy explained that the guy was actually better looking than she expected, so she thought about it for a sec but turned him down. Max, relieved, managed an aha, I see. He then feigned disappointment. Lame. It was getting interesting as he sipped his drink. Joy stated that right now, self-development and job hunting were more important to her, and she was still all about natural encounters. Max acknowledged her point. Joy then jokingly clarified she meant spontaneous meetings, not sleeping together, making Max choke on his drink, exclaiming, "Of course," while Joy giggled, "Sheesh." Max, wiping his mouth, wondered how she managed working full-time and preparing for a job change, questioning if it was even possible. Joy admitted it was pretty tough right now, unless it was an office romance or something, her fingers tapping on her laptop. Max grimaced at the thought of an office romance, finding it a bit yuck. He elaborated that he just thought the risks were too high. It's hard to keep it secret. Work focus might drop, and if you break up, the aftermath is messy, recalling a past negative experience involving Esther. He concluded it was more efficient to avoid it. Office romance aside, he didn't even know if he could date at all. Joy then playfully asked what if someone caught his eye. Max, flustered, repeated, "Someone catches my eye." Joy affirmed that could happen while working together. Max was silent for a moment. He then admitted he didn't know, as he'd never had that kind of experience. More than anything, he saw work as just a place to work and didn't think other kinds of relationships were necessary. Joy mused, so that's how you think. He asked Joy what he thought about office romances. Joy, surprised by the question, replied that he thought it sounded fun, romantic even. Then, leaning in and whispering, she added that more than anything, it sounded thrilling, which made Max exclaim, huh. Max, covering his mouth, theorized it was one of two things. Either she was already dating someone at work, or she'd never dated anyone there before. Joy then admitted that since she hadn't felt drawn to anyone yet, maybe her standards were just too high. Max recalled overhearing others comment on Joy getting hit on a lot at work. One guy wondering if she had a boyfriend and if he should ask for her number, only for his friend to warn him he'd get rejected. Max thought it would be weird if her standards weren't that high. If Joy ever started dating, her partner would totally be on another level, right? His mind flashed back to Joy's words at the bus stop. Personally, I think the opposite is better. Someone like you, Donggu, Kong Donggu, you idiot, he berated himself. Why would you think of that here? That was just a compliment as a colleague. Max then suggested they wrap things up and head out. Joy protested that there was still so much dessert left and Donggu didn't even get to eat. Max insisted he was fine and she could take it home. You wonder what was wrong with him lately, seriously. Outside, Joy commented that Donggu looked pale and asked if he was cold, as it was still chilly in the evening. Max replied he was fine, having had sweets, so his blood must be flowing well, a classic sugar rush excuse. Joy questioned if that really made a difference. She then asked if Donggu was heading to the bus stop too. Max, flustered, said he thought he'd take the subway today, wanting to go separately. As they parted ways, Joy asked when would be good for next week's study session. Max replied any day, but Wednesday worked for him. Joy explained she was taking a day off then. She excitedly announced she won a ticket to a book signing by her all-time favorite author. Joy gushed that she'd been a fan since high school and was finally getting to see them in person, asking if that wasn't amazing. Max, surprised, noted that she liked reading. Joy continued, saying they just released a new book and it was so good, her face beaming with excitement. Max watched her, a soft expression on his face. He'd seen her smile a lot, but he thought this was the first time he'd seen her this happy. Joy then offered to lend him one of her favorite books. Max, startled, agreed, oh, sure. His heart did a little wump. Back then, he didn't know. Joy waved goodbye, saying, see you tomorrow then. Max watched her walk away, Joy turning back for a final glance. He stood there, thinking about what would happen to him next week.